In Indian mythology, the word avatar was used to physically represent the god on earth. In the modern language, the meaning of the word avatar is mostly used to describe one's representation online. In the early arcade games of the 1980s, it was common to include a high score list, where players could write 3 letters. A symbol of one status they have achieved. This made several youngsters spend a lot of their time and money trying to get their name on that list. And this could have been seen as an early display of the power of avatars, as people wanted to get the representation of themselves in a high position in a competitive environment. Moving on from there, avatars got more advanced. Sometimes a player could write their full name, include different colors or 2D picture of themselves representing as that user, which is still used on internet forums, to where we are today, where games are much more advanced and players can choose between different pre-designed 3D avatars that represent them in the games, and they can customize those avatars by modifying the hairstyles, hair colors, nose shapes, and so forth. But throughout history, avatars have been used to represent the person in a virtual space. As massively multiplayer online games like EverQuest or competitive games like PUBG enter the scene, such representations become even more important, as other people can meet one's avatar online or learn to recognize him or her by watching them play. Esport athletes and gamers in general also are no longer the nerds that are hiding in their parents' basement playing games. They are the internet superstars, live streaming their gameplay to millions of people, filling out the biggest stadiums in the world, and so on. They are a whole new breed of celebrity, but still they're represented by some generic characters that's difficult to identify with. The way we represent ourselves tells a message to the outside world, who we are as individuals. Each of us gets up in the morning and starts messing around with what might be considered as an avatar customization tool, choosing what clothing do we wear, how to do our hair, whether or not we should put makeup or not, essentially choosing how do we identify ourselves. So the question we have to ask ourselves is it possible to identify with a video game character? Already today we can see some of the biggest companies like EA Games and 2K, and of course several smaller ones including us Full 3D, building technologies that allow the users to bring their likeness into the game by allowing them to scan their faces, so they can be represented as themselves, as unique individuals. But before I continue with personal avatars in video games, I'd like to compare esports with traditional sports and look at the trends that are happening in competitive game market there. So we all know that esports is growing massively, but traditional sports, on the other hand, is declining. Summer Olympic ratings are down 15%. The National Football League ratings are down 9%. The English Football League ratings are down, or Premier League ratings are down 19%. And not only people are watching traditional sports less, they're playing traditional sports less. And most of the studies suggest that esports is taking away from traditional sports viewership and participation. And just to put that into perspective, let's compare some of the biggest sporting events with an esport event. Super Bowl is one of the largest sporting events in the world. And in 2017, Super Bowl finals was watched by 111.3 million unique viewers. For NBA finals in 2017, it was 30 million. Comparing those both events with the second most important League of Legends International Tournament Mid-Season Invitational. Mid-Season Invitational finals in 2017 was watched by 360 million unique viewers, which is almost more than 3 times the Super Bowl audience. And that's not only with multiplayer online battle arena games like League of Legends. Here's a great example of PlayerUnknown Battleground, a game that popularized the new genre Battle Royale. The first PUBG tournament was in August 2017, which wasn't long ago after their initial release, and despite the inexperience by the organizers and this being the first event, it was still quite a successful event, having 500,000 viewers. But 7 months later, the numbers already changed. There was an event in Kiev called Star Series I-League PUBG 2018, and this already had 17.5 million unique viewers. And that number is already comparable with NBA finals, but we have to bear in mind that one has been around for less than 2 years and other for decades. And for PUBG, it's also interesting to watch player viewer trends, because the game surpassed 200 billion unique viewers only 7 months after its release, and the viewership was 15 times larger than its player base, indicating a growing popularity among non-gamers as well. So some of the other trends that are happening in competitive gaming market are that developers are trying to extend the life cycles of their games by offering services rather than singular experiences. Titles like Uncharted used to be the norm, but going forward we'll see a significant shift in blending single-player and multiplayer experiences together. We'll see much more persistent online worlds and focus on multiplayer features. Also, the business models are changing as developers are trying to monopolize your time and ultimately your dollars with more and more DLCs. And the relationship between traditional sports and esports is also constantly strengthening. Esport athletes are real athletes, and as esport grows in popularity, players who are the best at their respective esport and are pleasing personalities for fans to watch will become a major targets for acquisitions. And games are very social, making online video games one of the most common places for teens to meet their peers and create lifelong relationships. And as we already learned, mainstream audience is interested in gaming content. So all of this means that developers are trying to create games that have longer life cycles, which is good for esports, and they're monetizing with cosmetic loots and DLCs. And from the other side, mainstream audience is interested in gaming content, making an opportunity for gamers to sell themselves online by live streaming their gameplay or participating in tournaments. So all of this indicates a growing need for self-identification and expression in video games. So when we compare traditional sportsmen with esport athlete, why shouldn't the esport athlete have an opportunity to represent themselves as they are? As human beings, we are all unique, we look different. And by having our own virtual selves, we could differentiate and hide the gap between the physical and the virtual worlds. Because the thing is, anyone who's capable of compassion or imagination or identification wonders what it is to be like someone else. What if I were the superhero in the game, battling with my fellow friends, fighting for the victory? How can you not wonder about that, and why haven't games helped us think about it in a more intimate way? So let's take a look at also what does an academic world has to say about using personalized avatars in video games. So researchers who are studying the psychology of our video game characters suggest that using personalized avatars in video games communicates identity to the other players around us, generating all sorts of social motivations that drive the gameplay, especially in a competitive environment. In addition to that, The more an avatar resembles its user, the more likely the user will have positive attitudes like passion, connection, identification towards the game. Also, personalized avatars increase the body ownership, presence and dominance compared to its generic counterparts, even if the quality is exactly the same. There's an emerging line of research that also says that when there's a choice to customize an avatar, it's often about building a better version of ourselves, meaning people create slightly idealized versions based on their actual selves. So, a version of me with my face, but on a Superman's body with bigger muscles, for example. And there's also research by some Danish researchers suggesting that when there's choice to keep playing a game, experiencing the character actually ranks higher than the structure or killing enemies in a gameplay. Meaning the more we can relate to the character, the more we enjoy playing the game. All of this is strongly connected to how immersed we become, how much we enjoy the game, and how do we identify ourselves with the game. So, why I am here and why I am telling you this? Our company Wolf3D has been digitalizing people for the last 4.5 years. Avatar creation has been expensive and accessible only for those who have access to scanning studios. But our goal is to democratize the process of creating believable 3D avatars of anyone in the world. So, if you're a developer creating some interesting games or experiences and are thinking, how can I make my experience more personalized or make it more social, then I'd love to have a chat with you and learn more about what you're doing. And you can find more information about on our website. So thank you. Do we have questions?
There's a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So your company, you guys work very closely with VR companies to help them, help them achieve this avatar embodiment inside the virtual world.
Yes, so we work closely with VR companies who are building games for PC and mobile. Essentially, we are trying to, we have built a product that's smartphone-based product that's accessible for the whole user base. And we're working closely with developers to provide this opportunity for their users so they can have this personalized experience.
Gotcha.
Do we have any other questions? Yeah.
So how do you go about, if there's a platform, and like a gaming platform, and they want their community to be able to make 3D avatars, how would that practically work? Like, how would an individual in their community get their avatar created?
Sure. So that's a good question. So we have developed a smartphone application and SDK that we provide for developers. So we partnership with different developers and game publishers to connect our technology with their game. So once the integration is made, the user downloads our application, makes the scan, and the scan is sent into a specific game. And they can enjoy their avatar already in the game. So we're essentially creating a game-ready asset that's sent via API call to the developer, and the developer doesn't have to change anything because we have made our pipeline very flexible, so we can customize the output like rigging LODs, topologies, and so forth.
So the player uses their smartphone to do the scan?
Yes, the player uses regular smartphone, doesn't need any extra hardware to make the scan. And as we have made integration with some specific companies, they can choose which of those games they want to use that avatar in.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Yeah.
Using more in first-person shooters versus casual games, what's your kind of, if you had to predict in the next 3 years, who would be the best kind of game companies that would use the avatars? Where do you think is the lowest hanging fruit?
So right now we see the biggest interest in first-person shooters because they're very competitive and they have those social features as well. So what we very like are games that have multiplayer features and also they're competitive, because most of the, for me at least, gaming is social activity that I do together with my friends. So if the game allows me to have this experience virtually, then we believe that we can provide value.
And you can integrate with different types of stylized versions, right? Like you can
Yes.
a realistic version and different styles for different games and the art assets that each game company needs.
Yes. So as mentioned, our pipeline has built to be very, very flexible. So we can do AAA, very realistic quality assets to like Fortnite, slightly stylized assets. We essentially manipulate the textures and so forth in our backend automatically.